Right, so we're going to call the meeting to order. It is 7:01. First thing on the agenda is agenda considerations reserved for changes to the agenda items and order. Nothing's changed. Very good. Comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. Everybody's happy. All right, right on. So now we're at, initial discussion for a plausible work plan items for calendar year 2024. I'll give you a minute to warm up. Okay.
All right.
Get this on here.
So, this is our annual sit down and figure out what we're going to do for the year. We did this a little bit last year, and I tried to give you a version that had that on it with some things crossed off, which is exciting because it meant that we accomplished some things. Obviously, as things go, we have to add things in as they come up, so I'm not always able to follow it closely. But we did get those wastewater updates done. That was part of supplement 45. So that's crossed off there. We did work, you might recall, that degree of nonconformity. We did a lot of whiteboarding that one. Thank goodness for Zach, who drew all those out for us. Procedures for notifying the butters, and then there was a bunch of other stuff that never made it on this list. So I have brought back a clean version here. I started to put on some things that we've talked about late last year, some things that we've identified, and then some things that we just didn't get to that are still on here. So anything in black are the pieces that are carried over. Anything in red is something that's new. And of course, this is meant to just be an open discussion. That's how Rich wants to proceed, where we can just sort of talk about ideas. Do you want me to start by just going through why I've added some of these?
Yep.
Okay. So of course, I'll start with the ones that were on there from last year. Form-based codes, especially, this will help to bring Vladimir up to date. So the form-based codes GD3 update. This has, I think, been on a back burner since before I started here. But it is something we have identified as a priority. We had hoped to be able to get some grant funding to help us with some of the technical aspects of it, especially. So we have a form-based code in our Severance Corners district where we talk about what largely amounts to sort of building, siting, and architectural standards, so that when buildings are sited and designed, we sort of call it like architecture light. So there are some elements that go with it that talk about, how you have to break up expanses of building walls, how you have to have a certain number of windows, how you have to face your buildings, how you have to have different horizontal and vertical pieces. So this has been in place, this actual code has been in place for more than 10 years, I think. Does that seem right?
I don't think so.
I think so.
I don't think it's been more than 10.
You don't think so?
No. Maybe 5
there
to
have
6.
been some pieces that people have identified as, it was great on paper, but it's not quite working out in practice, which happens with all codes. People on the development review board have had problems with sort of interpreting and enforcing. People from the community who are building are saying this isn't really working out. What are you trying to get us to do here? And then just things that people in the community have noticed and says, did you really mean to limit that to 3 stories, for example? This is our growth center. Why aren't we having 4 or 5? So there is a significant amount of work here, both from a policy side of like, okay, let's talk about building height, to a technical side of, okay, if these bay requirements of how much your little bays have to stick out and how far apart they have to be aren't working, what does work? So there's quite a bit of work to be done there. You identified that last year as a priority, so you'll have to let me know again this year if you want to leave it up there. It will take quite a bit of time, but we're ready to do what we can do on it if it stays as a priority. And we'll come back to sort of organizing. I'll just do an intro first, if that's okay.
Yep.
And then we'll come back to saying, hey, this is my top priority, if that, I think that would be helpful. Parking standards, I would say that parking standards is something that I am hoping to prioritize because I think it's not as big of a project as the form-based codes update, but I think it will have just as big of an impact. Some of it's little, some of it's big. But the big thing that we've identified and the DRB has also, I think, had some frustrations with, some of it's small in language and in fix, but it's a big impact. So for example, we have something in there that says, so we have minimums and some maximums, right? So if you have a new building or an existing building, an existing business, and we have a prescription for you that says you're supposed to have, I'm going to make up a number, 15 parking spaces. So you need to have 15 parking spaces. We also have something in there that says you can't have more than 10% above that. The goal is admirable. The goal is that you don't have a ton of extra parking. It's a ton of extra impervious surfaces, creating stormwater issues. The problem is 10% of a small number is a small number. So when you have a business that's only supposed to have 5 parking spaces and they can't have more than 10% over, and they used to be a business that needed 12, they now have 6 parking spaces that they're not allowed to have, and they have to cover up or tear out. It's a lot of adjustment and expense that we just think is unnecessary. And I think that part of it is, just a chat about fixing that, right-sizing those parking numbers a little bit more. Maybe taking a look at that 10% and whether or not it applies only to certain size parking lots. There's a lot of things we can bring you. And then also looking at the numbers to start with. I think not just in Colchester, but a lot of communities, we overpark. We don't necessarily let the markets and the business owners dictate how many parking spaces they're supposed to have. We say that a retail is a retail is a retail. We know that retail is not retail is not retail. We know that something like a Trader Joe's is going to have a different parking demand than, say, a Walgreens. But they're all retail uses, and they're going to require the same number according to our standards. And they're probably going to be a big number. And we start to talk about what are the economic impacts, or all the impacts, environmental and economic impacts of having too much dead space. I call it dead space. So when you have unused parking areas, so of course you've got additional impervious surfaces. You have areas that maybe potentially could be filled with buildings that are taxed. They're now not. Parking spaces are not taxed. And you also have businesses that may have very empty parking lots that are actually succeeding and doing very well, but they look like they're not. Because you drive by and you're like, that lot's pretty empty. Maybe I'm not going to stop at Mr. Mike's Pizza today because it doesn't look like anybody's there. But really, it's just because they have a giant parking lot and they do have 10 customers and they're doing quite well. So those are some of the impacts of having just too much parking. So, and those are just a couple examples of some of the issues with parking standards. They have been in place for a very long time. I think they're out of date. And none of that even touches upon anything having to do with people using different modes of transportation, et cetera, which is also, a piece of the puzzle. I think it's ripe for looking at. I'm not trying to dictate the solutions right now, just tell you it's ripe for an examination. Signage. Signage is the number one thing we hear from businesses in town when they come to us. And sometimes it's just asking for stuff that we cannot deliver, especially when we're talking about the state billboard law and the off-premise sign law. But sometimes it is potentially stuff. I think that the signage regulations date back a long ways. I don't know, how much of a priority they are, but they are critical to some people, so I thought I'd put them on here. Not much to say about that. E, the small business outreach updates to review procedures, change in tendency. Another complaint we get, especially from small businesses, are when there is a change, especially in like, I don't call it like strip mall, but a multi-tenant building. Where you have 2, 3, 5 different uses in a building. When one goes out, when there's turnover, and turnover is frequent. That's just what happens. And the use is even subtly different. The process can take anywhere from 1 to 6 months to get permitted because of wastewater changes, or whether you have to do a site plan and then go in front of the DRB because, back to parking, you need 14, but you only have 12. So it is a complaint. I don't necessarily have solutions or even have fully identified the problems, but I'm hoping there's some potential there for looking at whether there's anything that can get streamlined so that if there is a very simple change, the medical office becomes a massage therapist. It's just changing your sign. But it's not really. It's a little more complicated than that. And I think we want to put businesses into empty spaces as quickly as we can. So that might be one way that we can help do that. From the DRB, this one's, well, there's 2 pieces. I don't know why I have them grouped together. Recreational amenities and open space standards. So right now, when you hit a certain threshold for a PUD, you're required to have a recreational amenity. I think they're feeling a little frustrated with the limited menu of what those recreational amenities are. So we're seeing anything from like, well, we put in a walking path. And so that's our, and we're talking large developments, like that's our amenity. And whether that's really sufficient or not. It's very open as to what that can be. So I think they're looking for maybe some help in identifying a little more specifically, maybe creating a bigger menu of what the options are, but being more specific about, all right, if you're going to do a walking path, we're not just talking about a place where you mow twice a year. Maybe it's a place that you're actually putting down some hard pack and some benches and some, bird identifying signs or something that makes it more than just a mowed path. So that's one of the things. So that ties in with open space standards of like what is actually being expected. The other thing that I think is frustrating to quite a few of us is that a wetland area that you couldn't build in anyway serves as the open space for quite a few projects. And I don't know if that's the result that you need to have. It may be, but if it's not, I think there's an opportunity to fix it where you might say we want something more meaningful or something more planned. We want to see a tot lot or a barbecue area or community garden space or whatever it is, but we don't want to just see a wetland that nobody can go in anyway. So there's some opportunity there. Lakeshore District landscaping standards, this is actually a very small, I think, easy fix. Right now there's some standard that says something to the effect of you have to, if you are building within the Lakeshore District, you have to add a scattering of trees or something like that. There's some word that is very not helpful. And so they're looking for language to replace that word. I don't want to say scattering, but it's not that, but it's that effect. So they're always like, what is a scattering of trees mean? Is it one every 3 feet? Is it like, do they too many clumped? I don't know. So that's something that they're looking for that I think is low-hanging fruit. but that they see a lot. Okay, moving on to new things that I'm throwing out for consideration. New legislation from this year may not be for consideration. You're probably not going to have a choice. There are a lot of planning-related bills being moved around right now. I don't know how many of them will stick. I was telling Sarita earlier this week that somehow I have volunteered myself to be on the Vermont Planners Association Legislative Committee. It was one of those like, hey, does anybody have information about this bill? And it's like, great, you're on the committee. So I'm following them a little more closely than I ever have before. But there's a lot going on. And I have a feeling that no matter what happens, something's going to stick. And it's going to have to come back to you guys to put into the regs. I don't know what yet, but there will be something. So we'll save some space and time for that after June, July. Food trucks, mobile food units. We talked about this a little bit ago. We don't have great regulations here, and we don't distinguish very well between a food truck that sits in a place for 6 months and a food truck that kind of parks around the neighborhoods or maybe goes to a business, for the day, every Tuesday. So I think that there's some improvements that we can do there that sort of draws distinction between them and has separate sets of rules that apply to them. And that makes clear, like, when a food truck is a food truck versus a truck that's permanently parked with a deck and umbrellas and never ever is going to move again. Maybe not a food truck anymore at that point. So we have some language. We had our summer interns in our department work on that last year. I just haven't done anything with it. I had them look at all of the language at some unassorted towns around us, and sort of collate that so we could kick it off this year. So I do have some research already done on that. Fireworks and cannabis regulation. This one I think is actually going to be kind of easy, or at least quick, I guess I should say. We just want to add some extra surety into our regulations. Both of these things, certain levels of fireworks as defined by the state, and cannabis retail are not allowed in Colchester. But I've spoken with our legal team about just ways to make it extra clear that when we talk about like a retail use, that does not mean that you can retail things that are not allowed. So I think that that's fairly low-hanging fruit that I'd like to bring to you this year, to just make sure that Colchester has a very famous case. I'm sure Pam's familiar with it, maybe some others, related to fireworks from 3 or 4 years ago. Sound about right? Was it longer? I think it made it all the way to the Vermont Supreme Court about fireworks sales. And it settled a bit of the question in our favor, but it didn't really settle the big question. So there's still some more that I think we can do just to sort of pad it, to make it even more clear and protect ourselves even better. We started out looking at the fireworks side of it, but I would say cannabis is exactly the same in terms of things that Colchester has not opted in. For those of you who are not familiar, a town has to opt in order to sell cannabis. Colchester is not one of those. So you are not allowed to retail it in Colchester. You can do other things. And on that note, another piece of that will be to better define how those other things line up with existing uses. So, for example, if someone says, I'm not actually selling cannabis, but I'm baking brownies that are cannabis infused, it's actually perfectly legal. There's a different level license. And we are told by the state that we have to allow that as long as that use is already allowed. So we are then tasked with lining up that uses, and some of them is easy. So like a bakery, we already have bakeries in town, just light manufacturing, for example. So just making clear that that would fall in that category. It gets a little trickier with some other things when you start talking about, manufacturing, wholesale distribution. Because we have a lot of little nuanced categories, so we would take some time to look at all those, best align them, bring them back to you and say, we think this is where they're aligned. The state, I don't know how much of it is legislation and how much of it is just the Cannabis Control Board trying to provide more clarity, but there's been some interesting cases about growing and farming and what's exempt and what's not.
Ducks.
And ducks.
And ducks, yes, y'all have read that. If you haven't, find it. It's out of Essex. Did you read that one?
What was that
Yes.
one?
So that's where this man is growing cannabis in his backyard with ducks, like the ducks kind of fertilize it and stuff, and the neighbors are upset.
And he has an outdoor grow permit from the state.
Right.
There are levels of permits. But the town fined him,
Out of compliance, isn't it?
on both issues. It sounds like, from what I read, they've been told they don't have a case on the cannabis growing, but potentially they have a case
On the
with
ducks.
the ducks.
Yeah.
So it's one to follow. If you haven't tried
How
it,
many ducks does he have?
I don't know.
Oh, my God.
But it
They
smells.
allow.
And it smells. It
Yeah.
sounds like the
that's
neighbors
what
are
it does.
smelling.
Yeah.
So we might want to think about that.
So I think that was the Essex report or something.
I missed that one.
I'll probably email you guys these things more often because they're kind of fun.
Yeah.
So we're gonna look, I'd like to look at those things. I think that there's not necessarily a ton of work from you guys, it's more work on our end. Conservation subdivisions is something that you guys have talked about, seem intrigued by. That might go hand in hand with an open space plan, so maybe it's not right yet. But the idea behind this, just to remind you, is that particularly when we start seeing more development in our more rural areas, so say you have a zoning district where you can build 1 unit for every 10 acres, but you have 200 acres, so 20 units. So that 200 acres gets those 20 units. Do you want those 20 units to consume all 200 acres? Or should those 20 units be clustered in some way so that you're not talking about miles and miles of driveways and roads and deforestation, et cetera? So that's what conservation subdivision looks at and lets you decide. You may be perfectly fine with it, I'm not trying to tell you you're not. But it does allow you to talk about that and say, this is what we want, don't want. Right now, we don't have those regulations, so if you were to build 20 units in that scenario, you could plop them anywhere that it made sense from a wastewater perspective. So that's what that would do. It is kind of a bigger project. And you may want to first do an open space update so that you know where you might want to apply it. Maybe it makes more sense in areas where there are larger intact forest blocks or habitat corridors, et cetera. It doesn't make as much sense in other areas. I don't know. Lastly, building types. So we talked about this a little bit when we looked at the rezoning along East Lake Shore. And you did adopt a trial part of this where it's not just density that matters, but also building types. So this is, for example, let's just say you are allowed a density of 6 units. Do you want those 6 units to exist in a single building? Do you want those 6 units to only be in duplexes? What do you want? How do you want those to be divided? So building types and setting those up and assigning them by zoning district allows you to look at that. It also allows you, if you want, especially in larger developments, to require a mix of types, so that you don't have all of the same type, should you choose that as a priority. Maybe you don't like the idea of an area of a more dense area having nothing but 60-unit buildings. We want a little variety. Having building types allows you to better program that. We started to decide when we got to East Lake Shore, but we didn't get above a fourplex. Small multifamily maybe is a type that we came up with. So there's an opportunity there to look at that more townwide, more types, if that's something that interests you. And I would call that very open-ended right now.
Any new ideas?
Anyone?
Did anybody have any other ideas they'd like?
So new ones to add to the list. Do you want to, is that what you mean, Rich?
Yeah, well, we're just talking about ideas.
I am, so I talked to Kathy about this yesterday, just about the, really looking at the commercial district and just looking at the possibility of changing it to a multi-use district with residential, because there's a lot of empty buildings there that are just sitting there that could be housing. I mean, I think that's what Winooski is doing right up to the Colchester line there. And not, I'm just saying maybe just explore it. You know, I think if it was thoughtful, I think it's going to be walkable with the double diamond. There's going to be a lot of places where people can cross. And I just think it'd be just a nice kind of little space if, you know, we could put some residential down there, or even use the empty buildings and put in housing down there. So that's, but I think we talked about when we're looking at the town plan, that would be a good time to kind of think about that.
You keep saying down there, are you specifically talking about like?
Exit 16.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's, I think it's zoned right now, just commercial.
Okay.
But there's a realty building down there that's been empty, I don't know, 3 years, you know, so, you know, it's a revenue source, and it'd be nice to be getting some taxes from them.
Didn't we have somebody in here asking for a variance in that school?
Well, you had a request from High Point Center.
Right,
Build
right.
something, yeah.
Yeah,
For a specific lot to add residential use. And I think the direction you gave them at that time was that the town plan said no rezoning in this area. I don't think you got into whether it was a good idea or not,
no.
just that it wasn't the right time.
So we can always look at it. Master plan's coming up,
Yeah.
2 years or less.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 years or less. Ideas? Anything? Huh? Me neither.
I mean, again, I like looking at recreational amenities and open spaces. Again, being somewhat intentional about putting things in place so communities can kind of have a place to come together, you know, whether it's picnic tables and barbecues, or, you know, I'd love to see a really, really good playground up at Severn's Corners, places where people could cross the street there. You know, so again, so people could, you know, kind of, it's a design so people kind of are forced to cross paths with one another and get to know one another. I know in Sweden or Finland, they do a lot of that intentionally, you know, that kind of outdoor design for people to, you know, just get to know one another. So I'd love to think about that as well.
I like that word intentional, or use it.
It's a good mix of big stuff and little stuff, which is nice, which we usually work at. I wouldn't mind us do form-based zoning, not so much jump into it because it's complicated, but it would be nice to have like an overview to look at, as simple as we can do.
Can you
What we have, the new buildings that are going up right now, and what we envision for that. And then, because nobody here has even heard of anything that was supposed to happen or what it's supposed to look like, that would be nice to have at least some time slotted in for that.
The new corner, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah, we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Put that on. assume staff led. You're not asking for the developer.
I don't know if he wants to. Let him know we're talking about it, that's for sure. If they want to have an idea on what they think, where they're going. Even if we don't do anything, at least we have an idea, gets the thought process going. You have to start somewhere before we dive full into it. 'Cause it's kind of a, form-based is a very, you got to think about it kind of deal,
Yeah.
you know?
All the consequences,
Yeah, exactly.
What did you say?
all the consequences that come from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they're just barely starting on it, and they started right in the middle, you know, the new one, so,
Oh,
Would be-
in the southeast quadrant. there,
Yeah,
the
southeast.
3 buildings.
yeah. I mean, if there's thoughts on Paul Simon's end, and he wants to discuss something,
Yeah.
you know, but it, as long as they understand, we're just getting a feel for what we started.
I think we have a couple letters in hand from both quadrants that have identified what they see as concerns. You know, at least from the Ireland side, they were very specific, like garage setbacks and,
Yeah,
so we do have a list, we just have to, when we get to it, pull it back out and
yeah.
work our way through them.
Do you think we could, I mean, this is just my thought, but the mobile food units and food trucks, it'd be nice if we could, yeah, I don't know the timing on it, how long things, but it certainly would be nice to kind of figure that out by summer, you know, so we could take advantage of. you know,
I agree.
them
I
being-
told Kathy, I don't think we have one in town, so something's wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's the most popular thing anywhere you go.
yeah,
Some of the towns actually advertise, we have this little food truck,
Essex.
and we're
yeah.
25 miles, and we don't have a single food truck.
Especially by the bayside, you know,
Right.
it's such a perfect
Yeah.
place to have food and be able to go to the beach and stuff.
Yeah, so,
Who owns that property? I mean, a
Andy.
lot of it comes to people having the truck on their property,
yeah,
so.
that's a rental property.
Which one?
Where the food truck goes, that's a rental property, that's not owner occupied.
The one where the trucks used to be?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is,
Yeah.
owned by somebody who did not own a food truck.
Right. But yeah, I agree. Be nice to look at that too.
Mm.
It's not that a food truck's not allowed there, just to be clear.
No,
That they're not allowed to be like permanently there. That site has an allowance for a food truck as long as it moves every, because of the wastewater issues.
Mhm.
Today, we're especially sensitive about those wastewater issues. But nobody who is willing to move their food truck every night has yet found that space.
all right. In a couple of years, the sewer pipe goes through, that might change. It might be more of a diner style idea,
Yep,
even if it's seasonal.
I'm hearing that one's kind of like kind of important to you.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other, I know we're not gonna be able to touch them all. Maybe we will, but.
Yeah, they're not too bad.
Huh?
They're not too bad.
Not too bad?
No.
I
I
like
think it's-
the signage thing too, the new signs for the schools, you know, there's new signs, they look really nice, and, you know, a couple of business people have spoken to me about just fixing up signs, or, you know, some signs are missing letters or haven't been painted in a while, and they were just, you know, wondering when the town was gonna kind of do that kind of maintenance, so.
On school signs, you mean?
No, just signs around town, you know.
Anything else really pulling at you?
Parking standards, pretty easy to take care of, at least to look at. Small businesses, anything we can do there, always. DRB, I don't think that's too complicated, maybe.
The landscaping, I love that. I love thinking about that. I mean, I don't have any ideas about it, but I'd love to have a conversation or have someone come in and present possibilities.
Another question I have for you guys, just as we're setting these up, you know, two of the last three amendments have been really long. Do you think you'll find it easier to take them in smaller batches and do two smaller sets of amendments, or keep going all the way to letter R again? I feel like Rebecca's gonna have some.
Well, no, I laugh because it started out being a small amendment, a quick, small amendment, and it kind of grew. As long as we keep it simple.
Yeah.
Well, it feels like that's what happens. We'll get started with some bigger things and like, oh, we just found this one little thing in here about like this, can we add it in? And they do tend to be small things, but we tend to find 10 of them.
And the big question is the legislation. What's going to happen out of that? I mean, that could kill us right there.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff moving around, a lot.
There's a lot of
And, you know, but there's a lot of stuff, there's always a lot of stuff moving around, and then one or two bills finally make it out or finally get passed. So I don't kind of like latch onto any, I keep an eye on things, but I don't get all like upset like I used to about bills like this bill, because it never even,
I'm trying not to. I was the one that said that you must limit parking spaces to no more than 8 by 16 feet. And that one I find especially interesting because it's part of the bill that the governor endorsed. His truck is longer than 16 feet.
that's so funny.
There's a little bit of irony there. So we'll follow those. I don't think
Yeah.
it's actually going to stick.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to tell you how to limit your parking spaces.
I think Act 250, there'll be some changes in Act 250.
Thankfully, that won't impact you guys.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I'd say we tackle the easy ones and then put a priority list on the rest of them.
Yeah, I agree. Start slow,
That's love.
build ourselves up. Definitely would be signage, parking spaces, standards, food trucks, fireworks,
Landscaping
landscaping.
and sign it.
Then, yeah, small business.
We'll start writing.
I found it really helpful too when you brought photos, you know, when you showed us photos. That was really helpful to
Yep.
kind of rule in and out, you know. But I think it's really important to get a sense of the character of Colchester, because that I think is important to say. You know, try to kind of just again be intentional about that and not losing that.
I think people learn very well visually.
Yeah.
Good? I got it.
And this isn't a fixed list. It's not like you guys can't add anything next month.
Yeah.
This month after. It's just to sort of help us understand, you know, especially in all the slow time we have in our office, what to sit down and write.
Is there anything else permitted besides what's building right now in Ireland, the new one?
Sorry?
Besides that new building, have they permitted anything else?
Um,
Because there's supposed to be 3 identical like that one,
over there, I don't think there's anything to permanent.
but they've only had the 3, there hasn't been a 4th, right?
No,
No. Okay,
I was going fast though, you're right.
yeah.
But-
Beginning to end for permitting, with beginning when they start a permitting, if they wanted to do the 4th building, they started next month, said, you know what, we want building number 4. How long for the permitting, you think? Do you have any idea?
Well, it depends if they have a site, so they did a master plan with like a subdivision master plan of where all the lots are. And then they have to come back to the DRB to get site plan approval for each lot.
Right,
I don't recall, I could look into it, but I don't think they have any site plans approved for any additional buildings. So I don't think they're construction ready after this one.
Okay.
They did the site plan for the one that's under construction and the one that's built at the same time because they were twin buildings.
Yeah,
And so they pulled the permits for them when they were ready.
Right.
But they couldn't just pull a permit, I think, for anything right now. They'd have to go back and do a site plan for the lot itself.
so how long? 3 months? Maybe, less, more?
To construction?
Yeah, to the day they can break ground, to the day they're approved, not break ground, to the day they can be approved.
Probably,
3 months,
Probably
about the same
fair.
as doing a supplement,
yeah, a little less.
a little less, yeah.
We schedule, like, somebody came in today, they'd be on probably an April agenda.
Mm-hmm,
We schedule about 6 weeks out,
right,
4 to 6 weeks out.
okay,
And then 45 days to issue a decision. And then 30 or 15 days after that before you can actually get a permit. And then you can go ahead and break some ground.
okay.
But I haven't heard, but those things tend to surprise me.
Yeah,
Long periods of wait and all of a sudden, boom. There are still some buildable lots on the southwest quadrant. It's easy to forget about that one over there, but there are some buildable lots there.
yeah, everything where the pine trees are. Lots come
In the
up,
front, yeah, there's
Yeah.
some towards the front.
right,
And I think that there's at least one at the rear, kind of far back corner. Past the playground, past the, back there.
so if we look at the amenities that the DRB's talking about, recreational, would we affect servants' quarters?
Should.
Should, right?
You can. It's-
Right,
How you apply it is up to you, but I think that that's the impetus for some of the discussion. I think that some of the frustration is that, at least in those, first two quadrants, that the amenities are light.
Yep.
When they could be less light. Although they're growing, I think there's 2 new dog parks that are in over
Hmm.
at the southwest quadrant. I've seen.
okay.
Which I don't know if that currently counts as a recommended or not.
Dog park? Hmm. It's a nice option,
Yeah. It's a very popular option,
yeah,
especially in,
Hmm?
I like it.
Yeah,
especially in multifamily.
yeah,
People want a place to walk their dog if they don't have a backyard.
yeah.
and it's a really nice place for people to meet, especially if they live in the same community. They're just-
The accidental meeting again?
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Fits right in.
I do.
So you did
Um,
see, we can talk about it later. We'll get to that one.
Hmm.
I don't have anything else on this.
Looks all good.
Okay.
Yeah. Any more on it? No? Just to let you work on some of the smaller pieces? Again, form-based zoning thing, think about that, maybe. End of summer, sometime in there. That won't, we'll be done with whatever we're doing here, but
Yeah.
definitely look at it this year.
Well, I think that what you've talked about for a while is if you're gonna break into it, you're gonna really break into it, but we may have to maybe walk that back and say,
Yeah.
okay, we will take a few pieces.
I think we should have a discussion before we even, to make sure that it's something everybody be on board to take on.
On how deep we're going
No.
to go into it.
Yeah, exactly. Know where we're at, what we're thinking, what our ideas would be. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. All right, we'll move on.
Okay.
All right, we got information items. Whoops, did I skip over here? No, information items and staff updates.
So, the only one on here is the January planning and zoning report, which we try to put on every month, but, because I put in my staff notes for you guys. This one's a little noteworthy because, there's a good-sized bump in the commercial activity. Anybody who actually follows these along and reads them month to month,
Yeah.
we don't see a lot of change in the commercial activity. In fact, I think the only change we've seen in a while is the rec center that got coded as a commercial building. But there is a tire warehouse being constructed, or this wasn't the tire warehouse. This was the storage units near the tire warehouse. And that northern section of town.
Yep.
So, noteworthy.
Yeah, but storage.
So I was just wondering when, like, I noticed that there was some permits that were, they ended like in 2022. Just wondering, like, what happens then? There was one on North Harbor, tax map 16, parcel 119, 120, 121, and 145, and then the boat slips. The ones going from 31 to 166, parking and boat storage, that had also expired. Do they just have to renew it, or does it just,
It's hard for me to comment without, like, looking them up. This list tends to just grow. It doesn't always get cleaned up. So sometimes there's stuff on here that's just been on for a while.
it was number 11, I think, maybe, North Harbor?
I'm not familiar with this one,
Mm-hmm.
so I'd have to look it up. But yes, generally speaking, once a permit expires, this is not listed here, I assume it's a site plan. Site plans expire. If you don't request a continuance, then they're null and void.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Okay,
You can request a continuance, but you have to do it before it expires.
gotcha.
And that continuance is only for 12 months.
Okay.
So this is a little nickel and dime thing, but you have numbers. Oh, never mind. I got it. I figured it out. I'm good. Yep, I got it.
I don't,
You gotta go all the way down.
Why did I keep going?
Yeah, I did the same thing.
Okay. Is it the same list?
Yeah, it's the same list. But you have to go all the way down to get into the numbers.
Okay.
These are auto-generated reports. We do try to go in manually when we can. But this one was issued, we try to do them on the first of the month, and it's also when I was sending you this report, so. Yeah, pretty raw.
I really like looking at them. You know, I just like looking at the activity and kind of who's building, and it's just, I really like that report.
All set? All set on that one?
I'm all
Yeah,
set.
we're all set. So now we're into the minutes. Oh, not minutes, I'm sorry. Planning Commission meeting schedule.
Get back. So, meeting schedule next week. We are likely, very likely, highly likely to be on the agenda for the select board to deliver supplement 46 and hopefully to warn a public hearing for a later date. I think per my email, I know Rich is coming
Yeah, so I can come.
and you're coming.
I said I would go, but I
When
just
she
want
said
to
she's
be like
gonna
in the
come and
back and
observe.
watch.
That's all we do is sit.
So that's February 13th. The agenda will be ready by Friday, so you'll have a better idea of time. So take a look there. I'll send it around too. I'll make sure you get a copy of it. You, at the last meeting, said that because March 5th is town meeting day, you didn't want to have a meeting, so I just wanted to confirm with you that that's still your intention.
Yep.
March 12th is, if all goes well next week, would be the likely select board public hearing. I know Rich cannot attend that meeting, but I think that we got some coverage.
Mhm.
I would say to hold one of the March meetings in case the select board has anything in that supplement that they remand to you. Remember that they cannot adjust things in the report. They have to send it back to you to adjust. So if there's something they don't like, they can strike things and warn a hearing for the things minus what they struck. But if they, for example, say, we want you to work on this element, you're close but not quite there, or we want you to change this number to this number. So if there's anything like that, you might want to hold a date, just so you're not waiting to April to look at that, but I'll let you guys know.
Well, are you saying that we should hold March 5th open if we have to meet then?
March 5th, or if you really want to hold town meeting day secret, it could be the second, so that would be the 19th.
19th? Okay.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have a meeting unless necessary, in case anything is remanded to you.
So definitely a meeting on the 12th and possibly a meeting on the 19th?
Yeah, and it wouldn't be your meeting, it would just be attending the select board's meeting.
The 19th or the 12th? Okay, yep.
19th would be only if the select board needs us to come back.
Okay, gotcha.
And we can discuss scheduling via email, that's perfectly allowed under open meeting law, so if there's a need for it, I will coordinate that communication. But just keep it in mind in your calendars.
Okay.
And then that brings us to April. And then just I started to think ahead about plans, so we either continue to discuss the work plan, or continue to do that, so maybe we talk about actual items. It's a good time to do our floodplain CRS check-in. So you act as the public information committee. We have to do that once a year, so it makes sense during the flood season to do that. And related to that, Karen Adams has offered to come talk to you about some of the town stormwater projects and how they relate to sort of flood abatement and managing ahead for flood work. So that department's doing a lot of work that impacts our ability to manage flood impacts. So, and we are required to have the CFM speak with you, and Karen is a CFM, a certified floodplain manager. So we'll be able to check a couple boxes with her attendance there.
Perfect.
So that would be the plan for hopefully April meeting.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right. So now we need a motion to approve minutes of January 16th.
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. And it's passed. Anything else tonight? Everybody's good?
All good.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Meeting adjourned. 7:55. Yeah. Yep. You can sign away. I'll take a pen if I can.